Welcome back. This is lecture 2 of module 7. In module 7, we are looking at the various applied domains of various socio-linguistic concepts that we have discussed before. Apply in terms of application, we have already discussed about language policy and planning in lecture 1. In this lecture, that is lecture 2, we will talk about language and its application in mass communication and how different kinds of studies have been carried out and how we can utilize the various kinds of socio-linguistic concepts and theories to understand mass communication in different domains. So, the lecture will explore the intricate relationship between language and mass media, examining how communication is a structured process across different platforms and the profound impact that media has on linguistic development and social understanding. It is a two-way traffic. It is not only that how language shapes media presence, but also how media shapes how language is created, understood and propagated. So, we will look at primarily three domains: language in advertisement, news and on social media. So, before we get into the specific examples, let us understand what we mean by mass media. Of course, everybody knows what mass media refers to. They are all the ways that information is shared with a large number of people at the same time. That is what we mean by mass media. So, any medium that takes news or any kind of information to a large number of people, that is mass. So, this includes newspaper, TV, radio, the internet and the social media and so on. So, we call it mass media because it reaches the masses. It is not meant for any specific group, but it is for consumption of the public, the general public. So, within that we have two kinds, the print media and the electronic media. Print media was more dominant some years back. Now, we have the electronic media as well. Compared to print media, electronic media of course is faster and also it reaches people instantly. So, the news reaches your home, it reaches your palm through the mobile phone. So, that is how fast the electronic media is. So, as a result of which electronic media has become more conspicuous compared to print media, but print media still does exist. So, that is why we are looking at both. Now, depending on the kind of outlet, depending on the kind of platform, we will have different kinds of content. So, if we divide them into different categories, we will have news. So, in the whether it is print or whether it is electronic media, we can have different kinds of types of content. So, it is not restricted to any. So, all of these 4 types of content can be available through either print or through electronic media. So, we have news, we have editorials and then advertising and social media, where we have online platform for communication and sharing, primarily for sharing. Sometimes however, you can use our news as well. So, news typically ideally should be objective and neutral, gives facts about any event that they are talking about, aims to inform and not influence. May not always be true, but this is what it should be doing. Editorial is opinion of the newspaper or the news channel, or sometimes they also invite influential people to write some comment, some opinion pieces and all of that. Advertising is a completely different domain altogether. They try to sell products, and social media is a place where we try to share things, we influence each other, we create certain new trends and so on. Now, before going ahead, we need to understand that media is a filter, it is not a mirror. Many scholars have talked about this and they have used their theoretical positions to explain how it works, but primarily the baseline is that media is not something just simply reflects reality. It functions as a system of filtered facts in which information is presented through a particular perspective or truth. So, depending on the kind of media that you are using, depending on where it is coming from, there might be multiple ways of filtering, depending on who owns the media house, depending on the political scenario, multiple factors might be there. But the truth remains is that any kind of news is projected, it is very often impacted by the ideological position. The media does take ideological position. This is more true today than it was before. It has always been, but now it is more easily visible, clearly visible. So, mass media are not neutral channel of information, rather they are powerful institutions that actively participate in the production and reproduction of ideologies. It might be the dominant ideology. Nowadays, we also have different ideologies having different publications and different media houses. So, dominant, dominated or whatever name you give, most of the time media is actually a filter. That is the basic idea here. And that is why it makes it very interesting for us to study media, the language used in media. So, how is the relationship, what is the relationship, what is the nature of the relationship? It is actually a very complex kind of a relationship, because the entire thing depends on how meaning is constructed, and how meaning is constructed in a particular given content, that depends on the ideological position, depends on the way you want to project yourself, depends on the target audience. Remember, we talked about audience design. So, audience design is very common and very easily palpable in case of media, the way media approaches a story, that is where audience design is very important. So, these are all perceived through mediated communication. So, media language, many of the studies, large number of studies, they study the media language from the perspective of semiotics, the signs and what they signify, alongside of course, the genre narrative. We have talked about this during our discussion on critical discourse analysis. So, the media studies are often part of discourse analysis studies. So, critical discourse analysis within the broader sociolinguistic paradigm. So, it explores how communication is structured, the different styles of language and the broader impact media has, and these are some of the important topics that are studied. As a result, this is a multidisciplinary approach, multiple perspectives are always used. So, sociolinguistics is just one, but you can also have media studies, you can have sociology, psychology, communication studies, culture studies, even business studies may take media language as a interesting domain to study. So, this has been the case for a long time now, and now of course, we also look at it from cognitive science perspective, how the human brain perceives all that goes on in the media space. So, multiple possible points of departure can be there. So, some of them could be language as discourse, text context connections, social shaping and so on and so forth. These are different, the study of media involves critical discourse analysis, as I just said. They can cover different forms, ideologies, style, register, genre, narrative. We have discussed all of these in the critical discourse analysis part. So, I am not discussing it again. So, for example, just one example, newspaper content includes news story, feature articles, opinion pieces, editorials, advertisement and all of that. So, newspaper is one platform where multiple types of narratives might be there. Each of them has a target audience, each of them use language differently depending on multiple factors. So, that is what can be studied. Classification is also part of the study. So, generic classification and communicative purposes. So, generic, when you decide what kind of news, so you what kind of a narrative that you are looking at, once you have generalized, once you have categorized them, then it is easy to compare across different media. That is another. So, for example, how is news propagated through the audiovisual media versus the print media, that could be one domain. So, is the language simple, same, or are there specific types of changes? For example, in today's news channels, earlier they used to be called news readers, now they are called anchors or something. So, now it is a performance, earlier it was just a medium. So, somebody would just sit and read the news, now it is no more the case. So, the same news might have different as a result of which, because the way it is presented, the language use will also differ. So, that in multiple ways we can study these things. And then the communicative purpose, media can also be classified according to their communicative purpose. So, they can be persuasive, informative, all of that, expressive, various kinds of things can also be studied like this. Depending on all these factors, language might be formal, language might be informal. So, on the basis of the audience design and depending on the genre and the narrative structure, we can have formal versus informal style. Formal style typically is associated with news, but now formal style we see in only some of the news. Print media, it is still formal, but audiovisual media, like there are multiple changes. Anyway, so usage of formal language will be primarily used for news reports, newspapers and editorials. So, this is an example where basically formal style means it will adhere to the strict code of the language. So, the syntactic structures will remain as they should be, there will be no use of slang, no regional dialect, colloquial expressions will be absent from that. So, when the formal language, the way formal language is, so you have to have a universal and authoritative tone, that is part of formal. Informal, of course, as the name suggests, this is part of, more often than not, it is part of advertisements, sometimes also feature articles, entertainment focused content and so on. So, often as a result of which, when you are trying to create this kind of content, there is a tendency to make a connect with the audience. So, language will be at the same time accordingly adjusted. So, regional variations might be used. So, and simple informal speech can also be used and so on. So, news reports are a specific genre of public discourse with conventional structure, style and rhetorical strategies. News editors and journalists employ a homogenized voice typically. Again, it used to be more true before than it is now, but largely this is how news reading are. So, they are not supposed to show a lot of excitement, because all they are doing is reading a news, a serious affair. So, homogenized voice without an apparent narrator constructs the news and frames its meaning for its audience. So, little space for opposing interpretation. So, whatever you are getting, you are getting. So, that is the only way, because they use the authoritative kind of a tone, authentic voice. So, you are simply telling what is the fact. That is why there are no possibilities of multiple interpretations. That is how it used to be. As a result, nowadays of course, news is seen as a social construction. From the perspective of discourse analysis, news is considered to take on a more social role by providing a frame through which the social world is not only understood, but also constructed. One of the biggest names in this domain who has studied the media language at length is Van Dyke. So, he conceptualizes news not merely as a neutral reflection of reality, but as a form of discourse. That is why it is studied through the critical discourse analysis lens. So, he argues that news must be studied as a structured communicative practice rather than as a transparent transmission of fact. That is one of his most important contribution. Whether it is social media news or print media or whatever, multiple interesting parameters are always at play, even if they are not very apparent. So, for example, social cognition is one such, power relations is another. So, dominant groups and institutions often gain privileged access to media discourse, and hence the voices that we hear from the media they represent the powerful, the voice of the powerful, not the powerless. Similarly, the social cognition refers to how a particular event is understood. So, the way it is understood by a set of people is what we get from the news, various kinds of news outlets. And because it is a discourse, like all discourses, it is ideology will have a strong role to play in creating and propagating the discourse. So, it will be seen in all of this. So, topic selection, because ideologies are never stated clearly, but how do we know that they are propagating a particular ideology? Through all of this. So, topic selection, lexical choice, the choice of words, that is, similarly the choice of metaphor, argumentation pattern, syntactic structure, all of these are indicative of the ideological background from which this is coming. So, one of his studies talks about description of the immigrants, where they use words like flood, burden or illegal. So, thereby implicitly activating a particular ideological standpoint with respect to a particular group of people. And then this is proposed by Van Dyke again. This is a ideological square. So, these are 4 possibilities: emphasize our good, emphasize their bad, de-emphasize our good, our bad, and de-emphasize their good. So, this is the structure on the basis of which this is the ideological polarization, and which is reflected through the discourse in media. Now, in today's time, when you talk about news, we cannot not talk about fake news. All of us have been victims of fake news at some point in time. So, fake news is also something that is being studied a lot. Now, what is fake news? This is simply put wrong news. misinformation which is not there, which did not happen. So, I say that I am that there was an accident, the accident was not there, as simple as that is the fake news. So, the news is not correct. Now, this is not as simple as that, this neither the phenomenon nor the study, but we are studying it more at length now. There is a systematic domain of studying fake news now. Some of the authors who are studying this, they have argued that fake news should be understood primarily as a deceptive communication, because it is not simply a wrong report, not simply talking about something that did not happen, or something that did happen, but you are saying it did not happen. It is not just that, it is about deceptive communication. So, in communication we talk about one of the most important theories of successful communication or a good communication is based on the Grecian maxims. So, there are multiple maxims, so quality, quantity, manner, and so on and so forth. So, all of that were basically created, the framework was created in order for a proper honest conversation. In case of fake news, we are not even going there, we are trying to deceive the receiver of that news. So, hence it should be treated as such. This is what Grave and Woodfield talks about. This distinction is crucial for linguistic analysis, because we are creating something rather than not giving the full picture, and as a result of which we can study the language that is used for deceiving, language that is used for creating wrong information, and so on and so forth. Now, misinformation and disinformation are two different things. Misinformation refers to false information, may be without the intention to deceive, but disinformation involves deliberate deception. That is how they have put it. Understanding fake news requires examining linguistic structure through registered variation theory. There are multiple theories now, as differing communicative purposes produce systematic differences. So, once you have understood fake news as a particular kind of communication which is deceptive in nature, thereby putting it in the category of disinformation, which has the intent of deceiving the receiver, as a result of which language will also be modified accordingly. And then we can how do we study that? We study that through various multiple pathways. One of them is registered variation. They have analyzed a well documented case of journalistic deception. Journalistic deception is not uncommon these days, but this is one case which is widely known. This particular person, he used to write for the New York Times. So, Blair admitted to fabricating multiple news stories, and an internal investigation clearly identified which articles were real and which were fake. So, the same person who used to write for NYT, he wrote some real articles, and then there were some fake articles that also he created. So, as a result of which we have a very solid database from where you can study how the language fake narrative, how it differs from the real news, because the person is same, the institutional context is same, and the time period is same. And these are some of the factors that the authors have come up with. So, real news characteristics will have greater information density and stronger epistemic commitment in authentic articles, and fake news patterns will linguistically less dense articles that convey weaker conviction and commitment. This is one of many parameters. Cognitive constraints will also be there. So, fabricating information places cognitive and communicative constraints, because you have to create a completely different something that is not there. So, naturally it puts more constraints in terms of cognitive and communicative domain. So, the broader implication is that the linguistic analysis of fake news has important implications. So, the implications primarily deals with the forensic linguistic, media studies, because at a time when fake news is everywhere, AI generated videos and wrong information is everywhere, this understanding how fake news differs from the real news in terms of linguistic analysis has a long way to go. It has a lot of potential domains where it can be utilized. Forensic linguistics is one such, media studies of course, and in computational fake news detection system. Now, let us go to advertisement. This is one of the most interesting domain in terms of media outputs, where language can be studied and has been studied, because media discourse needs language that is persuasive. They are trying to, the companies are trying to make you buy something that you actually do not need, most of the time you do not need. So, you will be made to spend your money on something that probably is you may or may not otherwise buy. So, language has to be very persuasive, and how do we do that? There are multiple ways, but before, different types of campaigns. So, behavioral change campaign is one, the other is of course sophisticated marketing for products. And in today's time, of course, we know that digital precision is something that is actually quite scary. Advertising, depending on your web browsing history, the servers will come up with targeted products and their advertisements. So, how do we study advertisement, the structure of advertisement? Through semiotics again. So, at the heart of advertising is the signifying structure of the elements that constitute the message. Now, this draws on structuralist understanding, of course, using both Saussurian and Peircean semiotic study. However, focusing only on the semiotic study may or may not be very useful. So, often we use also the understanding of the broader socio-cultural backdrop in order to understand how the signs are created and how they are effectively propagated. So, how does advertising work? Multiple different types of techniques are used: personalization, product image and subject position. Personalization through the use of direct address and the use of ordinary language. More often than not, the advertisements use ordinary language, so that you can connect, they can connect to the population, the masses. As a result of which, this simulates some sort of a conversation and minimizes the sense of distance between the advertiser and the consumer. You connect with them, they make you connect with them, so that you identify with the situation, and thereby you need that product to be completely in that scenario, that kind of a thing. Product image built through assertion of facts with positive connotations by visually associating with appealing images, and verbally through the word choice and even the accent of the speaker uttering the lines. Everything is very careful, because advertisements will not have a lot of time. It is not like a news reading, half an hour news reading session. It is few seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, something like that. So, within that you have to choose your punchline, you have to choose the target audience, and depending on that you have to have the product created. Subject positions constructed based on needs, values and tastes. Who are the target audience, what is there? You will notice depending on the product the company is selling, the dress code of the characters in the advertisement will change, the way they speak will change, the background, everything will change. So, all of that are carefully chosen, including the language. So, what are the linguistic devices? They use, of course, their written language, spoken language, image and sound, all of that are used. They employ abstract and unprovable claims designed to activate the customer's aspirations and dreams. As somebody said, that the root of their success depends on how inadequate they make you feel without their product. So, that is how it goes, such as a better home, a more desirable lifestyle and so on. So, to do that, what do they use? So, primarily a range of rhetorical devices. What are the rhetorical devices? Imperative, figurative language, euphemism, appeal to common sense. In fact, figurative language use is very heavy in the advertisements, because there, by saying very few words, you can convey a very big picture, rather an abstract idea also can be very effectively conveyed through figurative language. Now, figurative language, for example, metaphor. Metaphors are utilized very well in advertisements, both in print as well as in audiovisual method. One example would be the use of mobile phone while driving. So, there are those visuals where somebody is driving and then suddenly a phone call comes, and then they pick up the phone and there is an accident. So, the entire thing, they do not show the accident, they show the road, which makes you think as if the audience is traveling in the driving seat, and then there is a phone ring, the audience picks up the phone. All of that is conveyed through metaphors, the very effective use of sound and so on. So, these are some examples how to make you feel that you want it. So, this is a case of very powerful visual metaphor. You can see the boxing gloves, the person is standing, this is the winner, and this is the person who has lost the match, and so on. So, this is how you through a visual metaphor you can create a very powerful message. This is how advertisement go. The use of pronouns have been studied a lot. For example, Guy Cook argues that advertising uses pronouns in a very interesting way, idiosyncratic way. So, the way we, he, she, you, I, these pronouns are used, they have a particular purpose. So, we is typically the manufacturer, the company owners, he or she is somebody who did not use. So, that is somebody who needs to be brought into the fold, and as a result of which that person is distanced. I is often the expert or the narrator of the story. Now, you is very interesting. You is they call it slippery. They make use of both singular and plural reference to address both the individual as well as the group, and sometimes the dual function is also there for the pronoun you, second person pronoun you. The way they argue is you can also function simultaneously to refer to a character pictured in the advertisement, but with a clear appeal or address to the receiver. So, as a result of which the one of the target is of the you is the addressed person in the picture, but other person is also the audience. So, basically they are trying to simulate the audience into the story, thereby identify more clearly with the product and the willingness to purchase that product. Conceptual metaphor very commonly utilized, we just saw some of them. So, conceptual metaphor theory is one important theory through which we try to understand how the language of advertisements do what they do, the kind of message they want to convey, how do they do it effectively using metaphor. So, for example, this is an Indian study. These are some of the different kinds of domains that have been used. So, sweet, snacks, chocolates, they are typically they will be in the domain of happiness and joy, love and affection, family oriented brands, excitement, energy or cola drinks, calmness, lemon drinks, and so on. So, in Indian advertising scenario, this Kumari and Ghosh have studied multiple types of food advertising and the emotional mapping of the product on the domain of emotion. The products that they have studied, this is from there. And particular study reveals how Indian brands use powerful metaphors to transform products into emotional experiences. So, you are not just having bhujia, but you are sharing. So, sharing is caring. We often share food with our friends or somebody we really care for. So, bhujia becomes a source through which you share. Similarly, we in Indian scenario, sweets always accompany some kind of happy occasion. So, you are rather than having sweets, rather than having rasgulla, you can have chocolate. Situating the product within the culturally appropriate scenario by invoking certain kinds of emotions is how the metaphors are utilized. So, these are some examples. So, slogan smile deke dekho for chips packet, then Coca-Cola, Coke is family, Coke is a feeling, and so on and so forth. Multiple types of products and the way they have situated it, the way they have packaged it, and the way it is propagated, the way they are selling the product. So, Sprite is coolness, controls anger, thumbs up, heroism and arousal, and so on and so forth. There are multiple other techniques as well. So, brand name and logos, they can mobilize chains of connotative meanings. So, animal names for car models or logos can transfer qualities of speed, strength and stamina. This is also a very commonly utilized visual metaphor, utilizing certain animals for their the speed and the way the precise movement and so on. Personification, products and their promises can be personified. Beauty products are given nurturing qualities that can care and replenish. So, the very careful choice of words to create a persona that is sold. Similarly, metonymic associations, just like metaphor, metonymy is also utilized. Last is the social media. This is a new linguistic space, and this is where a lot happens these days. So, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, they have transformed everyday communication, creating digital space where language is used rapidly, informally and creatively. So, the primary difference is that unlike traditional written communication, social media discourse often blends features of spoken and written language. So, this is why it is also called hybrid digital communication by many scholars. So, social media language is unlike any other platform, language used in any other platform, be it the written or the print media or the electronic media of before. So, today this has opened up a new completely new domain of study. So, linguistic, this is called linguistic marketplace. Social media functions as a linguistic marketplace where people use or adapt their language to gain visibility, approval or group belonging and so on and so forth. And as a result, there are multiple types of hybrid communication. They use actively, they negotiate meaning, relationships and identity through multiple interesting and exciting ways of using language. So, informality and innovation as well as multimodality are two important linguistic features of social media communication. Now, these are certain processes through which identity creation takes place, and this is what also we study. Identity is something that we have discussed before, that this is understood as a dynamic and performative factor rather than an inherent quality, and that is why social media is so interesting. We adopt a persona in the social media space in the linguistic marketplace. Now, these are some of the methods through which we do that. So, audience design, users modify their language according to the audience and platform, professional on LinkedIn and casual in TikTok. Similarly, the hashtag identity is something that is very common these days, and then self expression for both individual self expression as well as collective belonging. So, there is a creation of different kinds of identity in the social space, in the digital space, digital social space. So, it can be individual as well as it can be group identity. All of these are possible in the social domain. So, we can conclude that social media has fundamentally reshaped how language is used and how identities are constructed. From a social linguistic perspective, digital platforms function as spaces of linguistic experimentations, where users creatively combine language, visuals and cultural references to express who they are and where they belong. Because social media is such a place where things happen quite rapidly and they spread quite rapidly, and not only that, those creative expressions do not remain confined to social media only. Eventually, they also come to the society, in the broader society, and become accepted modes of communication, accepted modes of language use. So, the role of mass media in shaping and evolving language can be understood as that both print and audiovisual media do have a very powerful role to play in shaping and standardizing language. Not only in the earlier domains, earlier times, print media and audiovisual media used to be the embodiment of the sophisticated speech and the way language, formal language should be used. Similarly, and that helped in standardization and vocabulary, polishing the vocabulary of the audience sometimes. And similarly, today the social media language is also helping us creating different identities by adapting the newer way of communicating, using language, visual media, using different kinds of other tricks that we do. So, language continues to evolve through media as editors refine content and writers produce new material in both formal and informal style. So, we can sum up this section by like this. So, mass media works like a linguistic megaphone, amplifying certain words and patterns until they become a shared way a community communicates. So, what starts in the media eventually becomes the hallmark of the community itself, the larger society itself. So, as social media continues to evolve, the study of language in online spaces remains essential. Now, due to its advent, content in almost all languages of the world is now available. Not only earlier it was only English and other important big languages, major languages. Now, of course, social media content is available in many other languages. The number is increasing every day. So, this gives us an opportunity to study how language can be creatively utilized in order for multiple purposes. So, critical discourse analysis studies those things. how identity generation takes place, how signaling takes place, how those signaling strategies are taken from the media to the real life and so on. So, mainstream mass media are largely aligned with dominant power structure rather than acting as agents of diversity and democracy, but on the other hand we can say that social media is actually a representative of the masses, that is quite democratic as opposed to the mainstream media. So, this is where we complete our lecture 2. In lecture 3, we will take up some more topics in the applied domain, where socio-linguistic understanding can be utilized to understand the world better. Thank you.